So in this case, what I wanted to get an understanding was that how can I leverage unique insights from, in this case, it'll be a podcast. And the podcast I selected was the GTM and AI podcast. So it's designed to be an example of how you can extract value out of these tools. And you can, ultimately, you can imagine you could build massive corpuses of competitive insights. Every podcast the competitor CEO was on, how do they talk? What's the strategy? All of the investor calls, all that can be synthesized, transcribed, put into a database, and you'd be able to query it. So I think that in this case, the idea is if you have the vision, the tools are available and they'll help you execute.
GTM AI podcast with Jonathan Moss and Coach K, where you get the latest with AI and GTM today. GTM AI podcast with Jonathan Moss.
Welcome to the Go-to-Market AI podcast, where we move beyond a traditional high-level theory to tactical, actionable, and transparent breakdowns of how to use AI today, not tomorrow, today. And that's really important because there's a lot of theory out there. There's a lot of things that you see, but you don't know how to practically implement it. And you also don't know how to solve the specific problems that can apply to your business. And that's what we do here. So I'm excited for my guest today, Scott Ewalt. So Scott, how you doing, my friend?
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about you and why they should listen to you? So we're excited. And obviously, I saw what you're going to share today, and I'm super excited to see it.
So my background is I've been an operator. I've led teams in product management, in marketing, customer experience. It is sometimes all in the same role and really all in pursuit of driving insane value for customers. So throughout my career, I've always tried to use technology as a wedge. Right. I tried to think of what I call an unfair advantage. How do I gain an unfair advantage using technology? So that meant I was leaning into AI and automation long before we've actually had this generative AI hype cycle. Since then, since that moment, it's just been, I've been all in. So I built commercial AI products. I've helped companies that are trying to find practical uses for AI in GTM and operations and product development. Now, the thing is, it's both amazing time, a somewhat confusing time. Anyone who's used these tools, even whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, they're so impressive that you do feel like you've got superpowers. In fact, you do have superpowers. This is incredible. But then it doesn't take you long to realize, so does everyone. There's a billion people on these tools, all with superpowers. And so that started to get me to think, how do I do this thing where I try to get the unfair advantage? How am I creating additional leverage that might not be what folks are doing in mass out there? Right now, you could go into these AI assistant tools. You can ask for nearly anything and something will come back, but they're going out to massive, the models are huge and you're sort of trying to triangulate on perfect information. And the best way to sort of synthesize what you really want, your own corpus of knowledge. And then that becomes something that you use the tool to then gain insight from this smaller, tighter pool of data. So we see people doing things like, let's take call transcripts in mass and analyze them and find these patterns. And that's what I would, what I lean into here. It's not the knowledge that exists within those calls in this case, but instead the knowledge that exists to help you gain competitive insight.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned a few things that are super important because a lot of people, there's a lot of fear in is AI taking jobs and things like that. And what I've really seen AI come around, which is it's really amplifying and giving you superpowers. And I love that you use that term because I use that term a lot too, is like, how can I give myself superpowers and do more? And in order to do more, you got to have domain expertise. And you also mentioned that. So that it's just amplifying the expertise that you already have in such a critical way. So I really love the fact that you talked about those things. And I do agree. It's really hard to keep up with. And there's so many great things that are being built today. And also AI is just, the technology is moving at such a rapid speed with new tools and new capabilities. It's really hard to keep up with. And that's why we really like on here to call us kind of like a show and tell. So excited to kind of see that. So I think for the guests, like if you're watching this right now, what will someone get out of this today? Based upon what you're going to show, just tell them what it is that they'll take away from this podcast if they make it all the way to the end.
So in this case, what I wanted to get and understand was that how can I leverage unique insights from, in this case, it'll be a podcast. And the podcast I selected was the GTM and AI podcast. So it's designed to be an example of how you can extract value out of these tools. And you can ultimately, you can imagine you could build massive corpuses of competitive insights. Every podcast the competitor CEO was on, how do they talk? What's the strategy? All of the investor calls, all that can be synthesized, transcribed, put into a database, and you'd be able to query it. So I think that in this case, the idea is if you have the vision, the tools are available and they'll help you execute.
Amazing. So we're going to break it down. So how we do this show, for those of you that may be new or been a while since you watched, we're going to break it down into 5 portions. The first one's going to be the problem. So what problem are we tackling? The impact that it has. So why does it matter? The implementation. How did you build it? What did you do? The tool stack that you use to do that. And then we're going to do the deep dive, which is going to be where you show us the goods, show us what you did, how you did it, and what it looks like. And I'm super excited to see what it came up with, especially since it's looking at podcasts, looking at the GTM AI podcast, and really see kind of what you built. So let's dive in. The problem. So tell us, so why would someone want to listen, get the information from a podcast, like from the business friction bottleneck, really kind of what does it amplify? So tell someone why they would want to do that?
If you're early stage, you may not have a lot of calls. There may not be that direct customer information. You may be looking to acquire it in different places, but that early research, it's so much richer when you start to develop a corpus of insight that you can then query and pull unique insights, unique wedges that don't tools on their own. That's part one. Part two is competitive insight is laying all around. If you aggregate it and pull it into your own resource, it can become a valuable way to gain competitive insight on messaging, competitive strategy, and all of that becomes your unfair advantage in your go-to-market.
Yeah, I completely agree. And these are different signals, if you will, or different places. Again, to your point, you can have AI go out and really analyze a ton of data or find this information and then come back and synthesize it for you and help, again, to your point, use it as a superpower, use it as a competitive advantage of what's resonating in the market, what your competitors are saying, maybe things that you've missed in your own messaging. So there's just so many ways that you can use this. So I love this something you put it together. And I think that leads into really the impact. So why does it matter? So a little bit like so the problem that it's solving, tell us a little bit about that. What problem is this solving at scale? And I think that's the other thing is it may be, we can kind of see what it's solving, but how can you do this at such a level on an automated way that it solves a big, unique problem that you have, whether it's, I don't have the investment, I can't hire someone to do this, all those types of things. So tell us a little bit about how you went about thinking about the impact of this use case.
The impact then comes from how you automate this, how you turn it into a repository of insights for you to be able to leverage, and turn that into messaging and high impact materials out to your marketing and sales teams to help drive the business.
Agree completely. And I also think there's one interesting element of this too, which is this kind of thought around these dynamic playbooks or dynamic messaging and things like previously you would have a playbook, right? And you'd have competitive messaging or, battle cards and things like that. And they would just sit and they wouldn't be updated for a year and things like that. And so much has changed, new entries into the market, new technology, differentiated features or capabilities that were launched by your competitors. And a lot of that's not picked up unless you had someone manually looking, manually updating, pushing the updates, enabling the team. So there's just a lot of manual process, and you've got to be able to have people, time, priority, investment, all the things that you need to do that. And I think what's interesting about what you're talking about is if you build this out and you have it running a lot all the time or just checking for updates, you can easily just filter those updates into a new battle card, a new messaging framework, new collateral and material. There's just so much that you can do with this, and it's always fresh. It's always updated. It's always recent. And so I think those are some critical things that make this so interesting. So tell us a little bit about, we love the messy middle. So nothing works as planned when you're building this or when you're doing these things. So tell us a little bit about, as you were going through this, what are some of the things that just worked immediately? What were some things that broke? What are some things that maybe were harder than expected? So just walk us through kind of the beginning to the end and kind of what happened in between.
What tends to happen with these tools is you get a pretty good result on the first pass. So the pretty good result was, I was looking that I could get a transcription of a podcast. Like it would generate the Python script, it would go out, it would generate the result. And I was pretty happy with that. Creating the automation, that turned into something that was working really well. But then I said, okay, this is cool. I can't wait to show this off. And I went, wait, it's not enough. It's not enough. What needs to happen is I need a vector database. I need to have a user interface over the top of it that looks pretty cool, that I can actually show in a show and tell that is interesting. Otherwise, I'm just showing my Claude Code. That part was kludgy, right? That part was challenging. I had things that were hung. Now, I'll preface everything by saying, I'm not a developer. Had never been a coder. If you told me I'd been looking at a terminal at any point in my life prior to the last 3 months, I would have said you were nuts. But
you mean you don't like the blank screen with the little flash thing and you're just sitting there? You don't do that? That's not your normal thing?
Oh, funny though, the reason why that's such a perfect interface is a user experience exists as the abstraction for us to be able to interact with a computer, and all of the layers that are put in there is designed to make it easier for the end user. But once you have AI sitting right there doing the job, you don't need the interface so much as you need AI to be able to do all these jobs. So that's why I think it becomes so powerful. But I digress. So talking about what was hard and what broke. I've got a list of bugs or things that hung. And so often I didn't understand why. It would be frustrating, or it might go off on a path that I didn't expect it would be going off on. And I'd say, whoa, what are we doing? Why are we doing this path? I don't want to have to use terminal to query this. No, I want an interface. Oh, okay, I get it. And so I would go through these paths of wasting some time. It's helpful that Claude has a thing called plan mode, which you should always use to start off. That helps refine those sorts of errors. But that was one thing. The other thing I noticed was, great, I've got this vector database built. I'm now able to query it. And I would send one model at it to answer questions. And the questions, it would come back with me with conflicting information. I said, wait a second, there's all this stuff to build this perfect repository of information. And then the model wasn't effective enough it was still doing the thing where it would hallucinate. So then I had to go back and make sure I was refining the model and that the model was the right one for the problem. And in this case, once I leaned on any of the frontier models, and by that it's right now in January of 2026, it's Opus 4.5, it's GPT 5.2, it's Gemini 3. I found my results were like, this is great. But yeah, I did run into some challenges along the way. And it took me, I might take an hour to go debug a thing. My version of debugging is hitting yes, hitting no. Ridiculous. Hey, I'm going to go fix this for you. Do you want me to do this? Yeah, go ahead. That would just take some time. It would run into a wall and then it would come back. It would need my help. So that was probably the most painful part.
Yeah. And I think that's important. You said a few things. So one is, you're not a coder. You don't look at terminals, you don't write code, but yet you're building. And I think that's one of the most powerful things, if you're listening to this podcast as we get into it, that you can go do, is you can now build with these tools and build in natural language by just talking. And then to your point, when you say debugging, everyone's probably, oh my gosh, what is that? How do I do that? And literally you just explained it. It's literally me asking questions or pressing yes to like, hey, I have a problem with this. It doesn't look right. Or, hey, you gave me an error message. I can just copy and paste. What does this error message mean? And can you go fix it? Like that's the response. And it's like, sure, let me go do that. And it's, oh, that's awesome. So it's not that you have to know these things. You just got to know what the output is that you're looking for. You have to know how to talk to whatever model that you're using or tool that you're using. And going into the stack that you use, how did you choose it? What went into it? Did you experiment? Did you like go deep on one? You said, hey, I'm just going to, because I think a lot of people don't know. And I get this question a lot, which is, which tool should I use? And it's hard to answer because there's so many great tools out there, and it all depends on what your skill set is, what you're trying to achieve, all of those types of things. So walk us through what made you select the tools that you selected. What did you select and how, and then we'll get into showing off those tools and kind of what you built.
Great. Okay. The way that I approached this was, I will just rewind back to the fourth quarter of 2025 when I started using Cursor. I talked to a few different people. So every place that I went, I'd try to go to as many AI conferences as I could. And I'd try to find out who's getting value from agents, who's actually doing, because I so much about agents, and I would pull up some of these agent tools and I found them kludgy. I found them challenging to work with. And so I wanted to ask around, and I started to triangulate. A lot of these people are using Cursor and Claude Code, and they weren't necessarily coders, but that was their main interface. So I was like, okay, I've heard of Cursor and Claude Code. I've downloaded them. I knew that they were impactful. I tried them out, and the interface sort of turned me off. When I started using it and seeing that what agentic really meant, that it would go do all of these tools and go off to the web and interact with it in a way that I needed, or grab files or scrape something, or the fact that it was doing all of these activities on my behalf and that I could see it and it was pretty transparent, and that if there was a service that it needed me to go access the API key, it didn't give me instructions on how to do it. It pulled me right up to the point of, just here and grab the API key. And then it made things really easy. So that Cursor, as like the harness with Claude Code in the center, became the main way I built it. Mainly that's so I had an easy way to just look at all the files that I had within when I was interacting with Claude Code. And hopefully that means something to folks that are not used to this. When we show it, it'll make more sense. And hopefully we're able to demystify it, because I'm such an advocate now that I've seen it work. But yeah, there's an intimidation factor.
With Cursor, with Claude Code, and I'm a big Claude Code user, again, they can seem intimidating. Just with anything, as you use it, it becomes less intimidating. If you think about the first time you rode a bike, or you think about the first time you drove a car, those are intimidating things too. But guess what? Now you don't even, if you still ride your bike, and most of us, I don't even think about driving anymore. I just get in my car and go from point A to point B and don't think about a lot of things in between, because it's just something that you do now. And so don't be scared of it. There's a ton of content on YouTube about it. Scott's about to actually show a screen and show you how he built the competitive intel agent with Claude Code and what it looks like and what it does. And so I'd just say, get started, experiment. We were actually just talking about this right before we started, which was, even with Claude Cowork now that they released that, it's almost like a stepping stone into Claude Code. And you can do a lot of things with just the skills, creating skills inside of Claude, which I show on the YouTube. So if you go there, there's actually a how to create skills and use skills. But ultimately, you can make stepping stones to get there. But the key is, I always say this: experiment, have fun, just don't be intimidated by it, and learn. You got to continue to stay curious, especially during this time.
So I'm going to run it through, because I actually had to go to Claude Code to just say, give me all the things here. So if for development was Claude Code in Cursor, the APIs I used were OpenAI for the embeddings, and you'll see what that means. Anthropic API for both the generation as well as the tool that I built so that I could query the database that was built. Python scripts were generated by Claude Code to do a bunch of the jobs. So then those go back into it basically lands in a folder and says, I built this Python script and it does X, and it has a set of instructions that said, hey, when you need to do this job with the Python script. I love it. It's great.
Let's get into it. Why don't you show us what you...
Let's just jump right in.
Let's jump in and show us, because I think the key is, again, as you're pulling this up, you're not a developer. You've not written code. You've not done all this thing. So all the stuff you're talking about can be, again, scary, but Claude or whatever tool that you end up using is there to help you, and it does it for you. You just got to be smart enough to know what output that you're looking for, or otherwise be able to just change it and edit it by just talking to it. Hey, I don't like this, change it. Or, hey, I'm trying to accomplish this. Why don't you help me accomplish that? Yes, guys, I'm excited to see this. So let's look at it.
Everything exists here within this folder. So when I start up in Cursor, it asked me to start a project, and I guess I can go back and see what are some of the projects I'd want to build. But it gives a setup. I drop in a folder. It's called podcasts. At the start, it had nothing in it. Then I told it the instructions. I said, what we want to do, and let me just cancel out of this and show you. I go to my terminal, Control J. Now, because I've zoomed in, it looks a little wonkier than what I'm used to seeing, but now I'm here. I can clear this out and just start fresh. So this is the Claude Code interface, as many people will experience it. And I just start asking the questions. The GTM podcast, here's what I want to get. I want to be able to grab all of the audio files and transcribe them into text. That's my description. So it runs some results. It creates among the things that it's doing, it creates a Python script that's found the URL for a feed where that podcast is coming from. It then takes that feed and pulls the audio, and then Python, then OpenAI transcribes it. It's transcribed and it's dropping them into markdown files. So you hear a lot about markdown files, just a kind of machine readable and human readable file that is generated. So just think of it just like text being pulled in. So as I get that, you'll see them start to drop into a folder over here on the left. So I'm going to pull that over here. I've got my podcast transcribed.
So what you did was you just went to Cursor. You had this Claude Code in the middle here.
That's
and
right.
You just basically told it, there was nothing else you had to do, but you just said, hey, I want to look at the GTM podcast. I want you to pull in all the episodes, the audio files and things like that. And what you just said is it actually goes out, it finds it on whatever's available on the web,
Right.
And then it pulls it in to folders and then does all the transcription and everything for you. Is that right?
You nailed it. That's exactly what it's doing. So then it's creating the file structure as it's gone in and said, oh, I'm going to create a folder and it's going to be called podcast transcripts. And here we've got the GTM podcasts. And so it pulled 91 of the podcasts. So now they're all in here in text. I also did some analysis of that before I ever built the interface, before I built a vector database. I was like, cool, I have all these markdown files. Claude, tell me what cool thing you're finding out about it. So even that, you could try that. Let's drop the folder in. There you go. I've dropped the folder in of all the transcribed podcasts. And I could say, I'm in what they call plan mode. So the plan mode's key here. You hit Shift, Tab, you're in plan mode. This is like the safe zone where you could begin to do things without it having going off and building stuff. But you can say, yeah, insides, I should have my whisper flow on here. This is a live
By
demo.
the way, which is great. And by the way, for those of you listening, whisper flow. So I use Willow. Scott uses whisper flow. I will tell you you should be talking more to your computer than you are typing. And both of those tools are phenomenal for just being able to take audio trend, just what you say, and actually type it out into an LLM or Cursor or whatever it is. It saves a ton of time. So you said want to get the key insights. So it'll be interesting to see
It'd be what it's going to come up with. So it's reading now through all the podcasts. It's going through all these markdown files. Why? Because All the files are in that folder. I dropped it in there and it's good to go. Why is that easier? It's because it's already on your computer. You know, when you go to use some of these other tools, you're having to do the extra legwork to drag and drop it in. And this is just easier. And it's building it within your folder on your file system as you go. So when I say building it, it's giving us transcriptions that's dropping into the folders on my computer or cloud or wherever you want to put it. So that part is super powerful.
And it is because here's the thing. So typically, and then why it's so important, typically, let's say you used just Claude normal chat or ChatGPT normal chat, and you maybe said, or even Gemini maybe said, hey, here's a link to the GTMAI podcast. I want you to go through and kind of do this same thing that you're doing here. What you'll miss is a few things. One is you won't get a full transcript of every single, definitely not 91 episodes. And number two is something that you mentioned, which is super important, which is this created you a database, if you will, in the folder of all of the transcript. And all you now have to do is, to your what you just did, drop the folder or call the folder and then ask questions. Whereas if you didn't do that, you would have to go back and do the same thing over again. It would have to go back and call it, or you'd have to go back to find the same chat. Maybe that's 100 chats deep. And so being able to do this, you're actually just created you like a mini database. So I think it's important for everyone.
Yes, and that's the starting point, was the mini database. And you're like, okay, great, that's amazing. And so in this case, it's analyzed 91 episodes. What are the core problems AI solves? Here's the headlines. Only 39% average quota attainment across sales teams. Less than 10% of sales teams receive regular coaching. Sales reps spend only 30% of the time with customers. Marketing teams use 15 to 30 plus disconnected tools.
Well, those are some big problems. Yeah.
And so I could grab this. Now I could you get really wild and drop it into Notebook LM, generate yourself a presentation. You've got these high level insights. So you're working in all these layers. Let's get atomic and granular. Let's get down to the very essence and then build on top of those atomic level insights with meta-analysis over the top of each one. And you're really synthesizing something interesting and cool that can provide differential value, something that is unique, something that, you know, you're not going to get by just going into Google and saying, hey, what are the top insights? Or no shade ever would have these other tools, which are amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
You never would have found any of this, to your point, by just going and doing a Google search, or even using probably some third-party software. Maybe there's some out there that does that, but ultimately you just show the power of what you can do and build by just using Claude Code and what's out there on the web and using the agent capabilities.
Yeah. So I couldn't help it. I actually had to go to Notebook LM and create some of the files on what it is that was built here. And so I'll be happy to share this with you after. Jonathan was building the GTM intelligence engine. And so a summary of the details of what got built, how it got built, and why it worked the way it did. Let's dive into a couple of other things. First things first, we got the podcast transcript. Cool, awesome. We've got them as markdown files. You can see, you can query them. It's not yet a tool that is leverageable for lots of folks. It's not yet turned into what we call a vector database, right? This is what in the AI world is being a way to get at the answers you want to get at and synthesize them more readily. So you can take all these files and turn them into a vector database. Because I asked Claude, I said, what can I do with all this now? Oh, what can you do with it? Try this. I said, all right, I'm going to try that. This is the highest leverage thing you could do, is build a vector database. That sounds hard. Not only hard, that sounds like I'm not the guy that does that until I am. We just built it on Claude Code. It told me how to do it, told me all the steps to go through. And so it created me a tool that I had a database. I was like, what's a database without an interface? So then I was like, let's build the GTM and AI podcast knowledge base interface. So designed to be easy to see on podcasts.
This is the sexy point there.
So a couple of things that happened, just to prove we've got the vector database and the embeddings, it created the insights. So it shows the 91 episodes, that there are 81.2 hours of expert conversation, different guests, this search chunk. So basically what it's doing is it's taking your markdown file and chunking it up into little smaller pieces so it could get at that information more readily. And then it's giving me the content, like how it's chunked things up over each month. So this is more an analysis of the vector database than it is the show itself. But here you're seeing how many tokens are allocated to each one. So all this is just say, is there a vector database? And okay, yeah, there is. There's the interface. Why is that important? Now I can start to query this entire tool set and get very specific examples of use cases. So just as I asked Claude previously, and it gave me the results, and they were sort of abstracted, which is fine. But here it's pulling out the insights and then pointing to the actual episode in line with the line.
Interesting.
Mentioned. You're seeing quotes by different people. It's synthesizing and pulling all these out verbatim. It's not doing the hallucination thing or sort of synthesize at a high level, which in many ways that's fine. It's sort of trying to triangulate and guess. It's like in this range of rightness. Okay, well, that's good. But this helps you be more targeted and specific to get the more enterprise type expectations of how you interact with data, rather than, that's probably why it emerged as a personal thing first. It's like, we're probably okay with a little error here and there. Enterprise. Yeah.
So basically, what we started with was you just asked Claude Code to go research the go-to-market or the GTMAI podcast, pulled in all the information, created a file of all the audio transcripts. Then you built a vector database because you wanted to, obviously you knew your end state was, I want to be able to chat with it or build some sort of user interface. And you don't know how to build, again, we talked about this, you're not a coder, you don't know how to build a vector database. So you just asked Claude Code, build me a vector database. Here's what I'm trying to do. Go through the steps. It'll guide you through that. It'll help you walk through. So you created that. The reason you created that, just in case those that missed it, is this helps with ensuring that you don't get hallucinations, ensuring that it's really focused on the specific things you're trying to accomplish in its database. And so as we talked about earlier, the first thing that Scott did was it built a database of all the audio files and transcripts. And so that's what's in the vector database that this sits on top of. Then you said, hey, I'm going to build a UX UI to sit on top of it where I can chat and I can see the insights. And I want it to be where it looks good on a podcast. And it created this. So no code, you're just sitting here talking to Claude Code about what you want, and it's guiding you and building all this stuff for you. Is that right?
That's right.
Isn't that it's amazing?
It's pretty awesome, right? Yeah, it's unreal. And so whatever questions you wanted to ask of it, Jonathan, let's give it a shot here. It was a live demo.
All right, let's see. I would ask who's the better host. Let's ask the question, what are some of the top use case or ways to use AI for, let's say, sales. Let's say sales. Let's see what it comes up with.
All right, this is a fingers crossed moment here.
Fingers crossed moment. Live demo. It's what we love.
Yeah.
Oh, it's cool. I think the sources there now too at the bottom. So I saw the sources at top, but that's really cool that it's got the sources there at the bottom of that chat too. Which one?
Yeah. And it made the decision. That's how it would want to show it.
Nice. Oh, here we go. Look at that. How amazing is that?
Yeah. So now why do you need this over, I could go, okay, doesn't Google have 1 million token context window? That's pretty huge. I can drop a bunch of stuff in there with Gemini. And again, love it. Amazing. It's great. But why would you build a vector database and an interface over the top of it to do this? It's more efficient when it's using the data this way, when it's querying it this way. So rather than, I could build this to a massive size and I can query it and only be using 5,000 tokens on those queries versus every time I interact with it, I'm dropping, here's my huge data source of 91 podcasts into the Gemini interface and say, give me the analysis, it'll probably do a fine job. Now scale this over time, scale this across podcasts. Maybe you want all the podcasts that you can think of that exist in any language transcribed back into English for AI and GTM. Okay, great. This sounds like a pretty cool repository of information I can query. You can build it. You can have it turn into a database. You can, or a vector database. You can then have this interface of it, and you get the sort of granular level insights that you're getting here. So that becomes a difference maker. Now, you probably need a whole enterprise to do this, Jonathan. You probably need like teams of people. This probably takes weeks and months to do.
Millions of dollars, weeks and months, army. Yeah. Well, so tell me, Scott, give me the answer. How am I going to do this? I have limited money, not a lot of people, and I don't have that much time. How am I going to do this?
This was 3 to 4 hours total. Now, I started the whole thing from scratch. And mind you, there was an hour in there before the podcast where I was like, I need an interface. So that was the part where I was debugging it for an hour before I finally got it to work. Like, good. So, all right, was like trying to fit in at the last moment because I was doing steps that I wasn't doing previously. And those steps were like, I wasn't going to plan mode. I was just like, okay, go. I got to get in. I want to see something. And so it would take me in these directions. No, turn it back. And once you're in that path, it starts to get it. You're actually creating more problems for yourself, which is one of the reasons I say come from product and marketing. A PRD, build the product requirements document, tell it the details of what you want, be as detailed as you want to be, go into plan mode, have it come back with its version of its interpretation. It's going to be great. But thinking through what you want beforehand is huge, makes a huge difference. Winging it. Anytime I was winging it, I started getting in trouble.
In ways. Yeah. So I agree with you completely. Wait, how many developers do you have on your team that's building this stuff for you?
Oh, let me look. I have a marketing guy. I have a product guy. I have a data guy. I have a web interface guy, and I have a model that knows everything. And that's all wrapped up into me and to these tools. Yeah.
Amazing. That's just, again, and kind of bringing back full circle to what you said, 3 to 4 hours to create this, which is phenomenal. Because if you think about all the things that you built in that time frame, from going out, the database, being able to query it and save it, to building the vector database, putting this on there, it's just simply amazing. And something we mentioned at the very top, which we'll come back to, which is, how do we give you superpowers? How do we amplify you and the things you're going to do? And this is a great example of that, because 3 to 4 hours is phenomenal. And on top of that, you gave a very good point, which is spend some time brainstorming before you start. Like, what is it you're trying to do, et cetera. And like you said, and that can even be with Claude Code or Claude or whatever you want to do to build out the PRD or build out what you're trying to accomplish. So that way, when you ask Claude to start coding, and you can do it in plan mode, which is something great that you mentioned as far as plan mode goes, and using it there to get started. And that will help save time on the back end, because you'll do less tweaks to it, less updates and things like that, because it's fully fleshed and thought out. Man, this was 3 to 4 hours. I'm mind blown. So thanks for taking us through it, walking us through it. Anything else you want to share? I think you went to a show and tell actually last time we were talking about. What were some of the cool things? Leave us with a few cool things that you saw other people build as well that you took away.
The Claude Code bug has bitten more than a few people in the LA area. So the show and tell was really featuring the capabilities of what Claude Code could do. So you saw folks that were using the raw call transcripts to get signal from a broad range of different types of calls to identify where the opportunities existed, to augment any work that they may be doing with tools like Gong and other solutions. Full interfaces built over the top, and with multi-tenant SaaS platforms built on Claude Code.
Yeah. Wow.
Cool. Really cool stuff.
Yeah. So again, anything you can imagine, anything you have expertise, things that you've always wanted to build and never, you now have the power to do that. You just got to amplify your capabilities. And Scott, I thank you so much for joining and showing us how you're amplifying your own capabilities. You got 5 or 6 people all wrapped up into you, which is amazing. So thanks for taking the time to come and show us how you did it. We appreciate you coming.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the GTM AI podcast. Please follow, subscribe, like, comment, and come back for more.